diverged about 35 million years ago. So if you want to understand human emotions, choose the rat rather than them. If you follow that reasoning. So we will learn about the bottom of the mind by studying animals. And the bottom I call, along following Freudian traditions, a primary process. But this primary process is not unconscious, as Mark emphasized. The secondary process, basal ganglia, nucleus accumbens, amygdala, caudate putamen, these are learning machines. They're distributing lower systems up into cognitive space through learning and memory. The top of the brain, the neocortex, eventually gives us thought, but in the beginning, you brain and active memory space is basically empty. That's why developmental issues are so important. How we train our kids, what kind of programs we put up there. There are no evolutionary programs. There are not even a language instinct. That's a long story. So awareness might be a good term for the top of the mind, but here affective consciousness is already an experience. An experience is part of consciousness. It is like something to be angry and happy. The unconscious seems to be in the middle, just learning and memory distribute feelings into complex decision making. And human research is critical for top-down approaches. So 99.9%, just like ivory soap, is top-down research in psychology. Animal research is essential for bottom-up, but very few people are working on the primary process. The majority are working on the unconscious learning and memory mechanisms, like Joe the Dude, just a couple of blocks away here at NYU, who now says he regrets that he ever used the word emotion. He shouldn't have used the word fear. He should have called it behaviors, which he always has been. He should have called it the defense motivational system. That is a step backwards from my perspective. Okay, I've got to hit next one. I'm frozen in space and time here. These are affective qualia. A feeling, that's a good name. Qualia is experience and affective qualia. We know that angry behavior reflects an angry feeling because the rage circuits in the brain don't feel good. Animals turn them off. I did that back in the late 60s. And that is our measure of feeling. A rewarding or punishing effect of a neural circuit. So reward and punishment is not in the world, it's actually in the brain. That's the nature of an emotional system. So on the basis of producing clear emotional behaviors, we've got 7 primary processes. What are the affective feelings? It's not pleasure, even though people call it the reward system. Enthusiasm is a good concept. And depressed people don't have a lot of enthusiasm. Some of them don't want to even live. I'm going to use vernacular here, because we don't have agreed upon words on what the feeling are. Produces anger. Of course, anxiety, what shall we call lust? What would a Freudian say is a good word for lust? The feeling. Anyone? Passion? Pleasure. Oh,
Order.
What?
Orderliness.
Well, there you go. Excellent. We don't want to talk about it. We don't have words here. Tender and loving, lonely and sad, joyous. Depressed person has too much loneliness and sadness, psychological pain, and we mapped that in the 70s. They all have a dynamic. That's probably the neural activity. That is the feeling, but no one has really measured it. We've tried. It's very difficult. How do you situate your electrodes? So all these systems are rewarding and punishing. That is the evidence for a feeling. And if you don't have feelings in your novels and your movies, you're not going to have something that people want to read. So I promised my wife that she just came out with her first novel, self-published. It's available on Amazon. It has all the 7 emotions. And I was asked to write an editorial on this issue of what's the problem that we haven't produced any new psychiatric medicines through human knowledge? What is the deal here, guys? 60 years of the revolution, and everything's been found by serendipity. And it's the animal research that's supposed to provide this, but it has not provided it because it's taken a behavioral approach completely. And the stressors are general. You're not stressing the relevant circuits, you're just stressing the animal. You're doing too much to the brain. And you measure things that don't really have circuits, like general activity. Yes, the animal explores, but just moving around, that doesn't have a specific circuit. And people say that if the rat doesn't drink sugar water, it's depressed. Well, that's not validated by human experience. A lot of depressed people consume more sweets. Then you test the animal swimming, throw it in water puddle and see how long it swims. That's a measure of depression. These have not yielded any new medicines. So my argument is you have to go to the affective circuits themselves, and now we can at least conceptualize the emotion ones. So I started by studying the seeking system, the brain reward system they call it. The feeling is enthusiasm, it's not pleasure. And then we mapped the separation distress system as a possible model of depression, and we called it the panic system because it's certainly not anxiety. The regular anxiety fear system is very different anatomy in the brain. Oh, we started with puppies, and then we went to guinea pigs, and eventually we went to chickens, largely because we couldn't get support for this kind of radical research, taking the animal feelings seriously. And we found that opioids reduced this psychological pain. And if that little one's crying, like on the upper left, and we just pick it up, the animal stops crying immediately. And part of that relaxation is the touch releasing opioids in the brain. We showed that early 80s, late 70s. Touch alleviates pain, partly by releasing opioids. So the human touch of therapy should also be releasing opioids. Then we went to play, and it turns out when animals are having rough and tumble play, they're also releasing opioids. That's part of the pleasure of play. So the first attachment chemistry were these opioid molecules that Kosterlitz and someone said Candace Pert discovered it. 3 laboratories rediscovered it in 1973. Actually, a single person at Stanford University discovered it about 3 years earlier. But oxytocin and prolactin, the molecules in motherhood, dramatically reduce separation distress. These are wonderful targets for antidepressants of certain kinds of depression. Unfortunately, intranasal oxytocin doesn't really get to the right circuits in the brain. That's one problem. We mapped it with deep brain stimulation, and Damasio mapped human sadness for the first time. You can't map a feeling with fMRI. He used PET scans, and the anatomy was very similar. Now we know from Jan Karasubieta at University of Michigan that human sadness and human depression are low opioid states. So one aim is to reestablish opioids. So why not use safe opioids, namely ones you can't kill yourself with? Buprenorphine is a molecule like that. It's a partial agonist, it stimulates at low doses and blocks the system at high doses. The blocking prevents respiratory suppression to the point of dying. Yoram Yavel, after we failed getting permission to do this study in America, Yoram Yavel in Israel took up the baton, and this is just the pilot data that he found. One group got very tiny doses of buprenorphine, and they measured the Beck suicide inventory. And 60 people have been completed now, but I'm not sharing that data because prior to publication, one shouldn't do that.